Get her out of here. She doesn't belong with us. His voice cut through the air like glass shattering. Heads turned. Forks froze midair. A room full of polished suits and glittering gowns suddenly had only one subject, me. He didn't lower his tone. He wanted everyone to hear. His hand waved toward me like I was trash left too close to his dinner table. Look at her, he scoffed. Plain dress. No class. She thinks she fits here. A ripple of laughter spread. Soft, poisonous. Someone covered their mouth, pretending to cough. Another leaned to whisper, eyes never leaving me. I stood still. My shoes weren't designer. My hair wasn't styled by anyone but myself. And in that moment every detail became their weapon. He smirked, proud of the performance. This is a place for people who matter. Not leftovers. That word landed harder than all the whispers. Leftovers. A label he carved into me without hesitation. The crowd didn't defend me. Some stared at their glasses, uncomfortable but silent. Others looked entertained, eyes sharp, smiles thin. That's the cruelty of crowds. They feed on someone else's shame to forget their own. I didn't speak. Not a word. My eyes locked on his, calm, steady, unshaken. He mistook my silence for weakness. What he didn't know was this. Silence does not mean defeat. She should have known better, a woman whispered, her pearls rattling as she leaned closer to her friend. Embarrassing, another muttered, lips curling into a smirk. The sound of their judgment slithered through the room, sharp as knives. I could hear it even when they thought they were quiet. I was the spectacle, the evening's free entertainment. He leaned back in his chair, satisfied. His glass clinked softly against the table as he raised it in mock triumph. Let this be a lesson, he announced, as if the room were his classroom and I the failed student. Not everyone is meant to sit at this table. The laughter that followed wasn't loud. Didn't need to be. A quiet chorus of agreement is far more dangerous than a single shout. Some faces turned away, too cowardly to join in, too afraid to defend. Their silence was another kind of betrayal. I walked toward the exit. Not hurried. Not broken. Just steady steps on marble that echoed louder than their whispers. My back was straight, my chin unbowed. Behind me, his laughter chased me out, full of arrogance. He believed he had ended me in that moment. But arrogance blinds. He didn't notice the quiet fire in my eyes as I left. He didn't feel the weight of the vow I carried with me. Because what he destroyed was not my worth. It was his own future. The door shut behind me, but his voice lingered in my ears. Not good enough. Doesn't belong. Leftovers. Each word was meant to crush. Instead they burned. I stopped beneath the streetlight outside. The night air was cold, biting at my skin. My reflection in the restaurant's glass window looked small, plain dress, tired eyes, no diamonds, no shield. But the fire inside me said otherwise. He thought rejection was the end. For me it was the beginning. I opened my phone. On the screen was my reality, the sleepless nights studying while others partied. The business plans scribbled on torn paper, the emails no one answered. All the quiet battles he didn't see. He judged me on fabric and labels. He never looked deep enough to see the mind behind the plain dress. That was his mistake. I clenched my fist, whispering to myself, I will not prove him wrong. I will rise so high that proving him wrong becomes meaningless. The city stretched before me, lights blinking like 1,000 challenges. And I accepted every one of them. That night, while he toasted his victory inside, I walked away with something far more dangerous than anger. I walked away with purpose. He thought he had silenced me. But silence was only the beginning of my roar. The world forgot that night. But I never did. While he spent his evenings laughing in glass towers, I worked in silence. Long nights. Empty pockets. Doors slammed in my face. Rejection stacked higher than bills. I scrubbed floors to pay tuition. Took night shifts to keep the lights on. Slept on library tables with textbooks as my pillow. People mocked. Still trying. Why don't you settle? Dreams aren't for people like you. Every word fueled me. Every doubt sharpened me. Years blurred together. Sweat turned into skill. Sacrifice turned into knowledge. I studied when others slept. I built when others wasted. First came the small win, my project chosen when no one expected it. Then another, an idea that solved a problem bigger companies ignored. Slowly, pieces began to fall into place. Investors listened. Doors opened. One opportunity led to another. I learned to fight with silence. To answer doubt with results. To let every scar become armor. He thought he had measured my worth that night by the price tag on my dress. But what he didn't see was the empire forming brick by brick, hidden behind my silence. And while he mocked me as leftovers, I was becoming the feast. Every stone thrown at me, I used to build higher walls. Every insult became mortar. Every failure a foundation. By the time I was ready to step back into his world, I was no longer the woman he rejected. I was unstoppable. The first headline was small, hardly noticeable. Local startup wins innovation grant. My name was buried in the third paragraph, but it was there. Then came the second, an award handed to me on a stage where the lights were brighter than the diamonds I once couldn't afford. Cameras flashed, reporters asked questions, and my answers carried weight. Soon I wasn't the one knocking on doors. Doors began opening before I touched them. I hired people who once doubted me. I signed contracts that others thought were impossible. I walked into rooms where my voice was not only heard, it was sought. And with every step, his world crept closer. He didn't notice at first. To men like him, women like me remain invisible until the ground shakes. But whispers began reaching him. Have you heard of her? She's moving fast. Her company's expanding. First he laughed. Just noise, he said, brushing it off with the same arrogance that once dismissed me. But noise when ignored becomes thunder. And thunder always warns of a storm. I didn't chase revenge. I didn't plan for our paths to cross again. But fate has a way of circling back. The same crowd that once watched me leave in silence would soon gather again. Only this time they wouldn't be whispering about my dress. They would be whispering about my power. He thought storms never return. He forgot their silence is only the beginning. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, polished marble, and laughter soaked in expensive wine. It was the kind of room he ruled until I walked in. My entrance wasn't loud. No gown dripping in jewels. No need for gold to announce me. Just a black dress, sharp lines, steady steps. Simplicity turned into power. The room shifted. Eyes followed. Conversations faltered mid-sentence. Not because of what I wore, but because of the way I carried silence. He was at the center, of course. Always the center. Surrounded by his usual circle, telling stories that inflated his importance. The same smirk carved into his face. The same arrogance in his voice. Until his eyes found mine. The glass in his hand trembled. For a second his charm cracked. A flicker of recognition. A memory he thought he buried now standing alive in front of him. He blinked twice as if disbelief could erase me, then forced a laugh too sharp, too quick. But I didn't look away. My gaze locked on his, calm, unbroken, the same way it had years ago. Only this time the silence between us wasn't weakness. It was power. Whispers began. Is that her? She looks different. No, she looks unstoppable. The color drained from his face. His smirk failed him. Because the last person he expected to see in this room, the one he thought he destroyed, was the one who now owned it with her presence. And he hadn't even heard the real truth yet. His smile tightened, forced like a mask cracking under heat. He raised his glass to his lips, but his hand betrayed him, the faint tremor of a man no longer in control. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Silence pressed harder on him than any insult could. Welcome back, he muttered when I drew near, voice low, sharp with unease. Didn't expect you. The circle around him shifted, curious now. They sensed something beneath the surface. Whispers slid across the room like shadows. Do they know each other? She looks calm. Too calm. He looks rattled. He forced a chuckle, but it carried no weight. Still wearing simple things, I see, he said louder for the crowd. His words were weak echoes of the cruelty he once wielded so confidently. I tilted my head, calm, unshaken. My eyes stayed locked on him. I didn't answer. The silence stretched. The longer I stood there, the smaller he became. And the crowd noticed. Brows furrowed. Smirks faded. The air shifted. His dominance was slipping and he knew it. Enjoying the evening? I finally said, voice steady, controlled. No smile. No warmth. Just cold precision. He swallowed hard. Of course. Always. But his eyes betrayed him. Panic swirled where arrogance used to live. He tried to turn away, but the room had already seen the exchange. They had felt the weight shift. For years he had painted me as nothing. But in this moment, with every stare pressing on him, it was clear who held the power. And this was only the first strike. A nervous laugh slipped from his lips, but the crowd wasn't laughing with him. Their attention had shifted, hungry, curious, sensing a storm. Then a voice broke the tension. Wait, isn't that her? Heads turned. Someone whispered back, yes, years ago. He humiliated her at the gala. The word spread like wildfire. Murmurs rose, weaving through the room, louder with every repetition. I remember. He called her leftovers. Didn't he kick her out? That was her. His face paled. He shook his head slightly, trying to dismiss the whispers, but it was too late. Memory is a sharper weapon than any sword. And tonight it belonged to me. I stood still, letting their recollection do the work. Every detail of that night returned, now dressed in the sharp light of irony. He wanted to bury me with shame. Instead, he buried himself in front of the same eyes that once judged me. I let the silence breathe, then spoke, calm, clear for everyone to hear. People don't forget cruelty. They don't forget arrogance. They only wait to see if it survives the test of time. The room grew heavy. His throat bobbed as he tried to swallow the weight pressing down on him. And the truth was undeniable now. The man who once laughed at me had become the joke. The tables had turned, and the crowd knew it. But what he didn't know was that I hadn't even played my final card. He forced a laugh, too loud, too brittle. Ah, memories. People exaggerate stories, don't they? He raised his glass high, trying to mask his panic with performance. We were all young then. Who even remembers? But they remembered. And the whispers didn't stop. His eyes darted around, desperate for allies. A few of his usual followers nodded, forced smiles painted on their faces. But the weight of the room had shifted. The center of gravity was no longer him. He leaned closer, his voice a hiss meant only for me. Don't think you've won. You got lucky. Nothing more. I didn't flinch. My gaze was steady. Luck doesn't last this long. He straightened, puffed his chest, and spoke louder again, grasping for control. Anyone can dress up, make speeches, play a part. But real power. He tapped his chest, smirk returning like a dying flame. Real power comes from legacy. And that you will never have. The words hung heavy but weak. They were weapons dulled by desperation. I stepped forward, closer than comfort allowed. My voice was low, but every ear in the room caught it. You wanted me silent, I said, each word sharp. But silence is louder than your pride. And tonight, every eye sees which one of us is crumbling. Gasps. A few nods. Even quiet applause from the back. He froze. His smile wavered. The mask slipped again. And in his eyes I saw it clearly, fear. Because deep down he already knew. This was a battle he couldn't win. I let the room breathe for a moment. The silence stretched, sharp, waiting. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. Thick. Heavy. Every eye followed the movement. I placed it on the table between us. Calm. Precise. Legacy. I said softly. Let's test that. He frowned, confused. What are you? I flipped it open. Contracts. Signatures. Stamp seals. His eyes widened. The blood drained from his face. He reached for the pages, but I pulled them back before his hand touched them. Ownership, I said, my voice cutting through the tension. 32% of this company. Bought. Secured. Legal. Gasps erupted. Chairs scraped as people leaned closer. The crowd erupted into whispers again, louder, sharper than before. She owns it. Is this real? How long? His lips trembled as he spoke. No, this is forged. A trick. I smiled. Cold. Unshaken. Check the registry. Every record. Every file. My name is there. Not yours. The room shifted. The weight of power tilted. For the first time, people looked at me not with doubt, not with pity, but with respect. He stumbled back a step, hand trembling as he grabbed the table for support. His voice cracked. This can't be. But it was. And everyone saw it. The man who once rejected me for being not enough had just been reduced to nothing. And I wasn't done. He shook his head violently, as if denial could rewrite reality. His voice rose, cracking under pressure. No, you don't belong here. You were never. You're nothing without me. The words were raw, desperate, ugly. But the crowd no longer cheered him. They recoiled. Faces that once nodded in approval now frowned in disgust. The silence wasn't for me anymore. It was for him. Enough, someone muttered from the back. Another voice, sharper. She proved it. She owns it. Murmurs grew into a storm. Whispers swirled into condemnation. He tried to shout over them, his hands flailing, his voice trembling with rage. You're all blind. She's a fraud. Look at her. Look at her clothes, her face. She can't lead you. But his words landed flat. Too late. Too bitter. I stood calm, steady. My silence was louder than his screams. One of his closest allies, a man who had shadowed him for years, slowly stepped back, away from him. Another followed. One by one, the circle around him broke. He saw it. Panic spread across his features. His eyes darted left, right, begging for loyalty that no longer existed. No, he whispered. Don't you dare leave me. But they already had. His legs wavered. He dropped into his chair, shoulders slumped, face pale. The powerful man who once towered over me now looked small, defeated. And yet, I didn't move. I let the silence crush him. I let the crowd witness every second of his collapse. Because humiliation doesn't need noise. It needs witnesses. And he had all of them. I stepped forward. One slow, deliberate step. The sound of my heels against the floor echoed through the silence like a countdown. He looked up at me, eyes wide, chest heaving. Sweat glistened on his forehead. I stopped just inches from him. Calm. Cold. My voice cut through the room. You rejected me because of clothes. Because of status. Because I didn't look like you wanted. He swallowed hard. No words came. I leaned closer, lowering my voice so every syllable carried. And yet here I stand. Owning what you lost. Leading what you destroyed. Taking everything you thought was yours. Gasps rippled through the crowd. His fists clenched on the table, knuckles white. You thought I was beneath you, I said, straightening. My gaze swept the room. But remember, this power doesn't come from suits, or from old money. Power comes from silence, patience, and timing. I turned back to him. My final line fell like a blade. And my timing just ended you. The room erupted. Applause. Cheers. Not for him, not anymore, for me. Some stood, clapping, others whispering in awe. The same people who once mocked my plain dress now stared at me with reverence. He lowered his head, broken, his empire crumbling in front of him. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to boast. One truth had destroyed him, and I had delivered it. For a moment the room stood frozen. A battlefield of silence. Then it happened, one sharp clap from the back. It grew. 2, 3, then dozens. Until the hall shook with applause. People who once whispered behind my back now shouted my name. Some rose to their feet, others leaned forward as if to touch the moment, to claim they had witnessed history. And the shift was undeniable. The same men who mocked my shoes now lowered their eyes in shame. The same women who smirked at my plain dress now whispered, "She did it. She really did it." Minorities in the room, the ones who had been quiet, invisible, lifted their heads. Some smiled, some even wept. It wasn't just my victory. It was theirs. Because I wasn't only fighting for me. I was fighting for every single one of them who had been dismissed, silenced, underestimated. I stood tall. Calm. I didn't smile. Not yet. Behind me, he slumped deeper into his chair, shrinking as the cheers grew louder. His allies turned their backs, their loyalty evaporated. The crowd had chosen. And it wasn't him. This wasn't applause for a performance. This was judgment. A verdict. A declaration that the tables had turned forever. And in that roaring approval I felt it, the balance of power shifting, the scales of justice leveling at last. But even then I knew my fight wasn't finished. One last truth remained. The hall was still vibrating with applause when I finally spoke. Do you see it now? My voice cut through the noise. Calm. Unshaken. You built walls. I walked through them. You buried me. I rose higher. Silence fell. He stared at me, face pale, lips trembling. The man who once smirked in confidence now had nothing left. No words, no allies, no dignity. And that was enough. I didn't need revenge. His fall was louder than anything I could ever say. His shame belonged to him alone. I turned slowly, every step echoing against marble floors. The crowd parted without a word, creating space like a queen's passage. Heads bowed, eyes followed. I did not smile. Triumph doesn't need smiles. It only needs truth. At the doors I paused once more. The same entrance where I had once stood in silence, humiliated. Now I left in silence but victorious. And in that moment every whisper, every smirk, every rejection turned into fuel. He thought he had ended me, but all he did was create me.